The Chosen Season 6 Episode 1 opens in a way that feels different from anything The Chosen has ever done before. The tone shifts immediately. There's no warmth, no lighthearted conversation, no gentle build-up. Instead, there's a quiet tension that hangs over everything. You can feel it before a single word is spoken. It's the kind of silence that presses against your chest. From the very first moments, it's clear that this episode is not interested in easing us in. It knows where it's going, and it knows we know. That shared understanding creates something almost unbearable, a slow, steady sense of inevitability. What makes Episode 1 so heart-wrenching isn't just that the crucifixion is being revealed. It's how the show approaches it. The Chosen doesn't rush toward the cross. It walks, slowly, painfully, step by step. Every glance, every breath, every pause feels intentional. You're not watching events unfold. You're walking through them. Jonathan Rumi's portrayal of Jesus in this episode feels quieter than ever before. There's no dramatic outburst, no visible resistance. Instead, there's a stillness that speaks louder than anything else. His eyes carry exhaustion, yes, but also something deeper. Acceptance, sorrow, a love that doesn't pull away, even now. And that's what makes it so hard to watch. The episode reportedly begins in the aftermath of the scourging. The physical suffering is evident, but it's not exaggerated. The show doesn't focus on brutality for shock value. It focuses on weight. The weight of what just happened. The weight of what's about to happen. Jesus doesn't need to scream for us to understand the pain. His silence does more than any cry ever could. What's especially powerful about this new crucifixion scene is the way it centers emotion over spectacle. If you're expecting something loud or chaotic, this episode takes a different path. The chaos exists, but it feels distant, almost muted, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The disciples' reactions are already being described as some of the most devastating performances in the entire series. Peter doesn't look angry. He looks shattered. John's loyalty feels desperate now, clinging to something that's slipping away. And Mary, her grief doesn't explode outward. It folds inward. It's quiet, controlled, which somehow makes it even more painful. This is where The Chosen shows its strength. It doesn't just show us what happened. It makes us feel what it cost. Season 6, Episode 1 doesn't treat the crucifixion like a climax. It treats it like sacred ground. The pacing slows almost to a whisper. Even the space between words feels intentional. There's a heaviness in the air, like something holy and devastating is unfolding at the same time. And then there's the walk. The journey toward Golgotha isn't portrayed as a dramatic parade of violence. It's intimate, personal. Each step feels heavier than the last. You can sense the exhaustion in Jesus' body, but you can also sense a kind of unshakable resolve. He isn't dragged into this moment emotionally. He steps into it. That detail changes everything, because instead of feeling like we're watching a tragedy spiral out of control, it feels like we're witnessing a sacrifice chosen in full awareness. And that realization hits harder than any graphic image ever could. What makes this premiere so suspenseful is not wondering what will happen. We already know. It's wondering how deeply it will affect us when it does. There's a difference. The Chosen has always built its storytelling on relationships, on shared meals, on laughter, on miracles that made us smile. And that history makes this episode almost unbearable, because now every memory of joy becomes a contrast to the sorrow unfolding in front of us. When Jesus stumbles under the weight of the cross, it doesn't just look painful, and it feels personal. We've walked with him for seasons now. We've seen him heal strangers and forgive enemies. And watching him endure this without anger, without bitterness, without retreat, it creates a kind of heartbreak that's hard to describe. It's not loud heartbreak, it's quiet devastation. Season 6, Episode 1 doesn't ask you to watch. It asks you to feel. And by the time the crucifixion scene begins to fully reveal itself, something has already shifted inside the audience. The tension isn't coming from shock. It's coming from love, from knowing who he is, from understanding what this moment means. This premiere is not about violence. It's about surrender. And as the cross is prepared, as the sky seems to grow darker, as the disciples struggle to comprehend what they're witnessing, one thing becomes painfully clear. The Chosen has entered its most sacred chapter. As Episode 1 moves deeper into the crucifixion, something changes in the atmosphere. It's no longer just tense. It's heavy, the kind of heavy that makes every movement feel slower, every sound sharper. The world around the cross doesn't feel alive anymore. It feels suspended. The soldiers don't shout dramatically. They move with routine precision. That's what makes it chilling. For them, this is another execution, another criminal, another cross. But for us, and for the disciples watching from a distance, this is everything. And that contrast is what breaks your heart. When Jesus is finally laid against the wood, the episode doesn't overwhelm you with noise. There's no swelling music to tell you how to feel. There's space. Space to hear breathing. Space to hear the shuffle of feet. Space to hear the faint tremble in someone trying not to cry. The nails are not turned into spectacle. The camera doesn't glorify the violence. Instead, it lingers on faces, on hands clenching, on eyes shutting tight. The pain is real, but the focus is emotional. The moment stretches longer than you expect, almost uncomfortably long, and that discomfort feels intentional, because this isn't meant to be easy. Jonathan Rumi's performance here becomes almost unbearable in its restraint. He doesn't thrash. He doesn't scream endlessly. His suffering feels internal as much as physical. His jaw tightens. His breath shortens. His body trembles. But what stays with you is his expression. There's pain, yes, but there's also something else. A quiet endurance. A love that hasn't disappeared. And that's what makes the crucifixion scene in Season 6, Episode 1 feel so different from other portrayals. It's not about how brutal it looks. It's about how personal it feels. When the cross is lifted, the movement is slow, almost agonizingly slow. The wood creaks, the ropes strain, and for a brief second, everything feels still, as if the entire world has paused to watch. The sky looks darker, not dramatically stormy, just dimmer, muted, as though creation itself understands what's happening. Below the cross, the disciples struggle in silence. Peter can barely keep his eyes on Jesus. The guilt he carries is written all over his face. Just days ago, he promised loyalty. Now he stands powerless, swallowed by regret. His anger has nowhere to go. There's no enemy to fight, no miracle to expect, only reality. John stands closer. His youth makes the moment feel even more tragic. He looks like someone trying to memorize every detail, as if holding on to the image might somehow keep it from slipping away. And Mary, her grief is the quietest of all. She doesn't collapse. She doesn't scream. She simply watches. That kind of controlled sorrow is devastating. It's the grief of a mother who knows she cannot change what is unfolding. Her pain doesn't need words. It radiates in stillness. One of the most heart-wrenching elements of this episode is how time feels distorted. Minutes stretch. Glances linger. Even the wind feels louder. The show refuses to cut away too quickly. It forces us to sit in the moment. And sitting there is hard, because The Chosen has spent 5 seasons building love for these characters. We've seen their friendships, their doubts, their inside jokes, their growth. And now, all of that history stands beneath the cross. That's why this scene feels so personal. It's not just a historical event being portrayed. It's happening to people we care about. There's also something deeply unsettling about the crowd. Some mock, some stare, some look confused. And in their mixed reactions, you can almost see yourself. Would we have understood? Would we have believed? Or would we have stood there, uncertain and afraid? The episode doesn't answer those questions. It just lets them hang in the air. As Jesus hangs on the cross, but eyes for that sauce, the physical strain becomes more visible. His breathing grows shallow. Every word costs something. And when he finally speaks, the softness of his voice makes the moment even more powerful. There's no bitterness, no accusation, only forgiveness. And that's where the heartbreak deepens. Because forgiveness in that moment feels impossible. And yet, that's exactly what's offered. The cruelty of the execution contrasts sharply with the mercy in his words. It's almost too much to process at once. The soldiers may see weakness, the crowd may see defeat, but the episode quietly suggests something else entirely. Strength, not the kind that fights back, the kind that chooses not to. As the scene continues, you begin to understand why early reactions are calling this the most emotionally devastating episode in The Chosen's history. It's not dramatic in the way people expect. It's restrained, reverent, slow, and that slowness forces you to feel every second. As the episode moves forward, the crucifixion is no longer just an event unfolding in front of us. It becomes something we are sitting inside. The air feels thinner, the silence grows heavier, and every second that passes feels intentional, almost sacred. Jesus remains on the cross, and the stillness becomes unbearable. His body weakens, but his presence does not. That's what makes this portrayal so powerful. Jonathan Rumi doesn't play this moment with dramatic extremes. He plays it with restraint. Small movements, subtle tremors, a slow rise and fall of his chest that feels like it could stop at any moment. You find yourself watching his breathing without even realizing it, waiting. The sounds around him feel distant now. The mocking fades into background noise. The soldier's movements grow less noticeable. The episode narrows its focus until it feels like there is nothing left in the world except the cross and the few broken hearts beneath it. Peter finally drops to his knees, not in loud sobbing, not in dramatic collapse, but in quiet defeat. His strength, the same strength that once made him bold and impulsive, has nowhere to go. He cannot fix this. He cannot fight this. And that realization crushes him more than anything else. John stays close to Mary. His face is streaked with tears he doesn't even try to hide. He looks young again. Not the confident follower, not the brave disciple, just a young man watching someone he loves fade in front of him. And Mary. Her silence becomes one of the loudest parts of the episode. There's a moment described by early viewers where she locks eyes with Jesus. No words are exchanged. None are needed. It's a look filled with grief, yes, but also understanding, as if both of them know this pain has purpose, even if it feels unbearable. That kind of emotional exchange is what makes Season 6, Episode 1 feel so deeply human. It doesn't rush to theology. It stays with relationship, with connection, with love strained to its absolute limit. The sky grows darker, but not in an exaggerated way. It's subtle, a gradual dimming, almost like hope itself is flickering, and the pacing slows even more. The show isn't afraid of stillness. In fact, it leans into it. There are long stretches where no one speaks, and somehow those are the most powerful moments, because in silence, you're forced to confront what's happening. There's no music guiding your emotions, no dramatic dialogue explaining the significance, just breath, wind, wood, and the weight of sacrifice. At one point, Jesus struggles for air, and the physical toll becomes undeniable. Each breath costs him, each word feels earned, and yet when he speaks again, it's not with anger, it's not with despair, it's with love. That's the part that lingers. Season 6. Episode 1 makes it clear that this crucifixion scene is not about showcasing suffering for shock value. It's about revealing the depth of devotion behind it. The kind of love that stays when walking away would be easier. The kind of strength that endures humiliation without retaliation. And as the hours seem to stretch on, something shifts in the crowd. The mocking grows quieter. The certainty fades. A few faces begin to show doubt, confusion, even fear. It's subtle, but it's there. The episode doesn't shout it. It lets you notice it on your own. The soldiers who once looked indifferent now seem unsettled. One of them hesitates before looking up again. Another avoids eye contact altogether. It's as if they're beginning to understand that this is not just another execution. There's something different about this man, and that realization ripples outward. The disciples feel it. The crowd feels it. Even the atmosphere feels charged with something unexplainable. The stillness isn't empty anymore. It's full of tension, full of meaning, full of a love that refuses to be extinguished. What makes this episode so suspenseful isn't wondering whether Jesus will survive. We know the outcome. The suspense comes from how deeply it will cut when the final moment arrives, because The Chosen has taken its time. It hasn't rushed through the suffering. It hasn't softened the emotional impact. It has let us sit with every ounce of it. And now, as Jesus' strength begins to fade, the weight of inevitability settles over everything. Mary's hands tremble. Peter can't look up. John whispers something we can't fully hear, his voice breaking. And Jesus, he looks down at them, not with regret, not with anger, but with compassion. It's almost too much to bear. The episode carefully builds toward the final breaths without melodrama. There's no dramatic countdown, no exaggerated reactions, just a slow, heartbreaking realization that this moment is approaching. And when Jesus finally declares that it is finished, the words don't echo loudly. They settle. They fall gently into the silence, heavy with meaning. After the final breath, Episode 1 does something unexpected. It doesn't rush toward hope. It stays with the grief. The cross still stands, silhouetted against a darkened sky, but now it feels different. Not active suffering, not tension building, just aftermath, the kind of silence that follows something irreversible. The disciples don't suddenly find strength. They don't gather themselves into courage. They scatter emotionally. You can see it in their faces. Shock, numbness, disbelief, the kind of heartbreak that doesn't cry right away because it hasn't fully landed yet. Peter looks hollow. The bold fisherman who once spoke without thinking now seems unable to speak at all. His guilt is heavier than ever. He had promised loyalty. He had sworn he would never fall away. And now the one he loved hangs lifeless before him. That weight is crushing. John stays close to Mary, but even he looks lost. There's no comforting explanation, no reassurance to offer her. His faith isn't gone, but it's shaken. And the way the episode lingers on his expression tells us everything. Sometimes love means standing there with no answers. Mary's grief becomes even more devastating after the silence settles. During the crucifixion, she was controlled, contained. But now, with the finality of death undeniable, that control begins to fracture. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in subtle trembles, in the way her breathing changes, in the way she looks at the cross as if trying to memorize every detail. There's something profoundly human about that. Season 6, Episode 1 doesn't treat this as just a theological turning point. It treats it as loss, a mother losing her son, friends losing their teacher, followers losing the one who gave their lives direction. And that focus makes everything heavier. Reports from early reactions suggest that the episode allows the body to remain on the cross longer than expected. Not for shock, not for visual impact, but for emotional truth. Because death doesn't end in a single moment. It lingers. It settles. It changes the air. The crowd begins to thin out. The earlier noise is gone. What remains feels fragile. A few onlookers stand in uneasy silence. Some seem unsettled, as if they're questioning what they just witnessed. Others walk away quickly, eager to escape the weight of it all. Even the soldiers appear quieter now. Their earlier indifference feels replaced by something harder to define. Not necessarily belief, but discomfort, as though they sense that this execution will not fade into memory as easily as the others. The episode subtly shows how the world continues moving, and yet nothing feels the same. One of the most haunting elements described is the way the camera holds on the empty space beneath the cross after the disciples step away. It's a reminder that something has shifted forever. The man who once stood there teaching, healing, laughing, is no longer standing. That absence becomes its own character, and yet, beneath the sorrow, there's a faint undercurrent of something else. Not joy, not relief, but meaning. The Chosen doesn't preach it. It doesn't explain it. It lets it sit quietly beneath the surface. The idea that this was not chaos, not an accident, not a tragedy spiraling out of control, but something chosen. That word echoes differently now. Chosen. Throughout the series, that title has carried warmth, invitation, belonging. But in this episode, it carries sacrifice. It carries obedience. It carries love that goes all the way to the end. There's also a powerful shift in how the disciples look at one another. Before, they leaned on Jesus for clarity. Now they're left with questions. Fear creeps in. What happens to them now? What do they hold on to? How do they continue when the one they followed is gone? That uncertainty adds another layer of suspense to the episode, because even though we know the story doesn't end here, they don't. And The Chosen makes us feel that gap, that space between death and resurrection, that waiting, that confusion. Season 6, Episode 1 dares to sit in that in-between. It doesn't rush to the empty tomb. It doesn't hint too strongly at what's coming next. Instead, it allows the darkness to feel real, to feel final. That decision alone sets this episode apart. Many portrayals of the crucifixion lean heavily into either brutality or immediate hope, but this one leans into grief, into stillness, into the emotional cost of love. By the final moments of this section, the cross is no longer surrounded by noise. It stands almost alone, stark, silent, immovable. And the world feels changed, not because of spectacle, not because of dramatic effects, but because of what it represents. Season 6, Episode 1 doesn't just reveal a new crucifixion scene. It reshapes how we experience it. It slows it down. It personalizes it. It refuses to let us look away too quickly. As the episode nears its close, the aftermath of Jesus' death lingers in the air. The weight of the crucifixion isn't something that can simply be swept away. It's a moment that demands to be felt. to be processed. The Chosen understands this, and as the camera pulls away from the cross, the scene shifts from the raw, emotional intensity of the crucifixion to the quiet, disorienting stillness that follows. The disciples, who once followed with certainty, now stumble in confusion. Peter, who had been so sure of his devotion, now faces the painful reality of his betrayal. He may have denied Jesus, but the guilt he carries now is the heaviest weight he's ever known. His eyes are empty, his soul broken, and he stands on the precipice of an uncertain future. The boldness that once defined him has crumbled, and yet there's still a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark that refuses to die. But for now, it's a flicker in the vast expanse of silence and sorrow. John, too, is broken. The youngest, the most faithful, is left holding Mary, the woman who gave birth to the Savior. Together they stand in a world that has just lost its light. John's face is streaked with tears, but it's not just grief, it's disbelief. He's struggling to reconcile the love he knew with the violence he's witnessed. His faith hasn't disappeared, but it's shaken to the core. And as he watches the world around him crumble, the future that once seemed so certain now feels like a distant dream. Mary, the mother who carried this promise for so long, now stands as a symbol of quiet, devastating grief. Her face is unreadable at first, her eyes fixed on the cross. She has seen miracles, watched her son heal the sick, raise the dead, and give hope to the hopeless. But now, all she can do is watch as he dies before her. Her pain doesn't scream, it doesn't rage, it doesn't overflow. Instead, it sits heavy within her, a quiet surrender that mirrors the profound silence around her. That silence becomes the backbone of this episode. It is the silence of heartbreak, of disbelief, of mourning. It is the silence of something that can't yet be understood, a quietness that feels infinite, as though the world itself has stopped in reverence. And as each moment stretches, as the disciples begin to pull away from the scene, you realize that what the Chosen has captured here is not just a tragic event. It is the loss of hope. But that loss is not the end. That is what makes this episode so haunting. The Chosen doesn't shy away from the heartbreak of the crucifixion. It lets it sit in all its devastating glory. The episode allows you to feel the depth of the disciples' sorrow, their confusion, and their despair. But it also lets you feel the weight of something else, something waiting just beyond the horizon. This isn't the end of the story. We know this. But the show doesn't rush to give us that comfort. It lets us sit in the darkness with the disciples, sharing in their uncertainty, their helplessness. The silence around the cross is deafening, but that is where the power lies. For a moment, we are forced to feel what they feel, to grieve what they grieve, to wonder what will happen next. And in the quiet, you realize just how much this moment matters, how much this sacrifice means. It's not about what will come after. It's about what has been given here, what has been lost, and what has been gained. This isn't just a story about a man on a cross. This is a story about love that doesn't give up, about sacrifice that doesn't look for a reward, about faith that doesn't falter even in the face of death. This is the heart of the gospel, and the Chosen has captured it with such tenderness that it's almost impossible to look away. By the time the credits roll, you'll find yourself emotionally drained, not from shock, but from the raw power of what's been portrayed. The show has given us a crucifixion scene unlike any we've seen before. One that doesn't focus on spectacle or brutality, but on the emotional and spiritual weight of the moment. It makes you feel the pain, it makes you feel the love, and it makes you long for what's coming next. But for now, we're left with the silence, the weight of the cross, the loss that feels final. And yet, if you look closely, there's hope hiding in the distance. If you've felt the weight of this moment, if you've allowed the silence to fill you, you're not alone. The Chosen has invited us all to walk with them through this heart-wrenching journey. And while the grief is real, so is the love that has already been promised. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insights into this incredible journey. Let us know your thoughts on this pivotal moment. How did this new crucifixion scene impact you? What do you think will happen next? Share your thoughts. And join us as we continue to walk through The Chosen's most powerful season yet.